Okay. Okay, that's a little better. So, I just kind of want to talk about an incident that happened in one of my classes today. It was in understanding psychological disorder, which is like basically fundamentals of abnormal psychology. So we're just covering just like the basics of each disorder. So, schizophrenia, mood disorders, etc., etc. So, we were actually covering anorexia today, and, my professor really encourages us to share any personal experience we've had, and I think that she just wants us to kind of be able to take the stigma out of it. So, I mean, there was a girl in my class who had disclosed her own struggles with her eating disorder, and, she went through her whole story and everything, she had to go through. And then at the end, there was a girl in class who sat there and kind of questioned her, I don't want to say, like, credibility, but it kind of, she definitely invalidated her whole experience because of her weight. She was a seemingly normal weight now, which, again, is an indicator she did or didn't have an eating disorder, because, the criteria for anorexia is a BMI of 17.5 or lower, but that's at the time that you're struggling actively in your eating disorder. That's not to say that she wasn't at that. Even if she wasn't at that, doesn't mean she doesn't have an eating disorder. There's so many other categories she could have fallen into. So I'm sitting there listening to kind of this girl tear, this other girl apart. And I'm sitting there thinking, like, oh my God, like, we do this all the time. Like, as professionals, we do this. I remember going into the hospital and having my first experience, in an eating disorder facility, and, not having them take it as serious as, some of the others, because my weight wasn't necessarily in a danger zone at first. And it's like we do that so often, and it's disgusting because, say you were to, sit there and give the treatment that you needed initially, would my eating disorder have progressed as it had if given the right treatment at the beginning? I can't say yes or no. I would imagine, though, that if treated early on, I wouldn't have gone as deep into it as I had. And I think so. We have this, like, misrepresentation of eating disorders in our culture. You have to be, like, this big to be considered, I guess, like, or even to have considered to have a problem. And I think, yes, while some of us get to that emaciated state, some don't reach that, but that doesn't mean they're struggling any less, that they're functioning, is any more because their weight is higher. I don't think that at all. And I think my experience through it is, like, when I did meet that weight criteria, yes, was physically I in a more dangerous place than, say, a couple years prior? Absolutely. But I think that, the physical piece is just a small portion of the eating disorder. And I think that, the real danger is in your mind. And I think that, so many people die at seemingly normal weights because of the stigma that you have to be, 75, 80 pounds to, receive treatment. And I was just so enraged by this class, because here I'm sitting in a class full of, psych majors, people who are potentially going to be clinicians in this field. And this is the feedback she's giving her. What if you have a client sitting in front of you and you give them that same feedback? our position is to offer support and validation, and in making that claim, that her eating disorder wasn't as severe because of her weight, completely invalidated and could have set her off and triggered her into spiraling back into a relapse. And it's disgusting to me, and it's discouraging, because you would never sit there and tell someone who has cancer, oh, you don't look that sick, so you probably, your cancer isn't as bad as someone else, because, you're not bald and you didn't have to go through the treatment. No one would ever say that. And, we sit here, judging people with mental illness on a much harsher level than we judge those with general medical conditions, because you would never sit there and say that to a cancer patient, ever. But somehow it's deemed acceptable in our society to place judgment, on mental illness, especially eating disorders. And I just got thinking, and I got more and more enraged as the conversation went on, because, she was being backed up by the class, like, oh, well, like, my friend was this weight when she went in, and it was like, it became like a competition of who was sicker, and I think that in itself is so sick and so twisted. And someone who, is actively trying to pursue recovery, and who has been through, hospitalizations, who's been through the process, who's been through the system, who's worked with people. There's clinicians out there, that I met that had the same mentality, and that's scary. That's scary that we have people like this treating people with eating disorders. And I mean, I'm frankly scared for the future, and I'm scared that the only way we can give sufficient treatment or sufficient validation is if people are on the verge of dying. And at that point, is it too late? I don't know. I guess it's just something that was on my mind, and I felt the need to rant about. Feel free to kind of leave your own opinions on it.